What wondrous love is this that caused the Lord of bliss to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul.
Hello, welcome to Old Testament Survey, Pastor Gavin Productions in connection with the Boiling Point podcast. Also be sure to join us for the after show where we discuss certain details of the program today. So we're looking at First Chronicles, and the Bible is a book of history. And so what does First Chronicles deal with? Well, first of all, it was written, most people believe that Ezra the scribe wrote the book of First and Second Chronicles. Originally, First and Second Chronicles were one book. And when they translated the Bible from Hebrew into Greek in what was known as the Septuagint version, they divided the books up into two different sections because they're so lengthy. So the events that it covers transpired around 1000 BC. But Ezra wrote this, it's believed, like between 450 and 430 BC. And he wrote it to encourage the faithful remnant of Jews who had returned from captivity in Babylon. And so this deals with the history of the Jews, the southern kingdom of Judah. So First Chronicles is a repetition of Israel's history during the reign of King David. And so why did he want to repeat the history? Well, there was a lot of it that the people probably would not have been familiar with. So Ezra probably wrote this to encourage the faithful remnant of Jews who had returned from the 70 years of captivity from Babylon. So he begins with the first 9 chapters are genealogies. So a lot of times we have people that are interested in their family tree, and the Jews were interested in their ancestry. So, there's Ancestry.com and a couple other things that you can check out your family tree and your ancestors. Well, the Bible mentions them, and so in chapters 1 through 9, there are genealogies that begin with Adam. They go through Adam, through Noah, and to Abraham's line. So let me just show you the outline here. So the basic theme is a repetition of Israel's history during the reign of King David. So chapters 1 through 9 are the genealogies of Israel's 12 tribes. There's more than the 12 tribes, but then you have a section in chapter 10, the last acts of King Saul. Then the rest of the book, chapters 11 through 29, are a review of the reign of King David. So they focus on David's reign. So see, this has to deal then with the southern kingdom of Judah. These people had returned, and so Ezra's trying to make them familiar with it. So the genealogies then in chapter 2, like to be honest with you, genealogies are not that interesting. You know what I mean? All of the Bible is important, but not all of it is of equal importance. But these genealogies are important, but it's not the type of thing you'd read and say, wow, that is such a blessing that so-and-so begat so-and-so. What a blessing and a benefit to my practical daily Christian life. No, not really. But it's a source of information. And I find the genealogies most interesting when I'm looking for something. So, for example, suppose you wanted to just review in your own mind, who were the 12 sons of Jacob? Well, you go to chapter 2, verses 1 and 2, and right there they are. And so in chapter 9, verse 1, I want to read this, and he gives the reason why God allowed Judah to go into captivity, to be invaded by Babylon, and a lot of the people carried off captive for 70 years. It says, so all Israel were reckoned by genealogies, and behold, they were written in the book of the kings of Israel and Judah, who were carried away to Babylon for their transgression. So why did God allow their enemies to invade them and carry them away captive to Babylon? Because of their sin. They turned their backs on God. And, I think about America. I mean, I love America, but America has some serious problems. A lot of our people have turned their backs on God, the God of Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the one true God. A lot of our people are godless, and there will be consequences to nations that turn their backs on God. So that happened to the kingdom of Judah. So now let me go on. In chapter 10 gives kind of a finality of King Saul's life. And so King Saul goes out to battle with the Philistines, and he's struck down in battle and mortally wounded and killed. Now let me read to you the reason why God allowed King Saul to be killed in battle. It says, so Saul died for his transgression, which he committed against the Lord, even against the word of the Lord, which he kept not. So God gave Saul orders, he didn't obey them, and also for asking counsel of one that had a familiar spirit to inquire of it. So you remember he went to the witch of Endor to try to bring up the prophet Samuel to talk to him, and that necromancy, trying to contact the dead, that's an abomination to God. And Saul knew better, but he did it anyway, and inquired not of the Lord. Therefore he slew him and turned the kingdom unto David, the son of Jesse. So that tells us why King Saul's life came to such a tragic and a sad end. He could have lived longer and had a much better life had he obeyed the Lord. So in chapter 11, David is anointed the king, and the Lord gave him victory over the Philistines, and there's a list of his mighty men, and David's armies captured Jerusalem from the Jebusites. The people of Israel had trouble taking that stronghold of the Jebusites, but David captured it. And so chapter 12 gives us a list of some of the men who accompanied David while he was in exile. And so it lists the soldiers who made up the delegation seeking to encourage David to expand his rule beyond Hebron. And it shows that he had a broad base of support throughout Israel. Well, in chapter 13, David makes Jerusalem his capital, and he wanted to make it the spiritual center of his kingdom as well. So he commanded that the Ark of the Covenant would be brought from Kiriath Jearim to Jerusalem. So they put the Ark of the Covenant on a cart that was pulled by oxen, and at one point the oxen began to stumble. There was a guy there named Uzzah who put his hand on the ark to steady it, and the Lord struck him dead, instantly dead. Why? Because he touched the ark. That was a holy object, and no one was allowed to touch it. In fact, the right way they weren't transporting it the right way. God gave them instructions. The ark had rings in it, and the Levites were supposed to put poles through the rings so they could carry it and not touch it. So Uzzah died because of that. So that scared David. So for 3 months, he left the ark in the house of a guy named Obed-Edom. And so in chapter 14, the Philistines come against David, and David asks the Lord, what should I do? And so David obeyed the Lord and did just what God told him to do, and he defeated the Philistines. Quite a contrast from King Saul that was rebellious towards the Lord. So in chapter 15, David again wanted to bring the ark to Jerusalem, but this time he wanted to do it the right way. And, if we could just learn from our mistakes, if we do something the wrong way and we experience the consequences and then we learn a lesson from our mistakes. Proverbs says that a wise man hears reproof, and whoever hears the reproofs of life abides among the wise. You experience consequences from mistakes and you learn from it, you gain wisdom, right? So they brought the ark in the right way with the poles and the rings, as the law of Moses instructed them. And it was a time of great celebration and rejoicing. Singers and musicians played, and David danced before the Lord. And then in chapter 16, after the ark was put into a tent that David pitched for it, they celebrated before the Lord. They offered sacrifices and praised God, and David wrote a psalm. Then in chapter 17, David expresses this desire to build a temple. And, he prayed, Lord, we dwell in our nice houses, and yet you dwell in a tent. The tabernacle was basically a tent. And so, the Lord told him, heaven is my throne and earth is my footstool. I mean, where's the house you'll build for me? And at first, Nathan the prophet said, David, if that's what the Lord put in your heart, go for it. But then Nathan the prophet had a dream where the Lord told him, David, you've been a man that has shed a lot of blood. I don't want you to build the temple. I want your son Solomon to do it. So David, of course, accepted that. And in chapter 18, it describes how David conquered Israel's enemies, all the enemies around him. See, David put God first. He trusted the Lord, and God blessed him. So he conquered the Philistines, the Moabites, the Syrians, and the Edomites. So David conquers the Ammonites and the Syrians in chapter 19. And David's armies take the Ammonite city of Rabbah, and they conquer some more Philistine cities. Now, First Chronicles does not mention David's sin with Bathsheba. He didn't feel the need to. He was writing this to try to encourage the people. But he did mention David's sin of numbering the people of Israel. So, it was a prideful thing to number the men of Israel to see how many armies you had, unless God told you to do it. So, as a result of it, there was a judgment that came on the nation, and David chose 3 days of pestilence, and he ended up buying the threshing floor of Ornan, the Jebusite, which would be the place where the temple would be built. So in chapter 22, David desired to build a temple for the Lord, but even though the Lord didn't allow him to build it, David made plans. And he set aside funding and gathered materials for the temple. See, Solomon becoming king when David would die, Solomon would still be pretty young. So he gathered 3,750 tons of gold and 37,500 tons of silver. That's if my calculations into our modern weights are correct. And he commissioned his son Solomon and the men of Israel to build the temple. So in chapter 23, David is approaching his death. So he appointed Solomon as king. And he also organized the Levites to assist the priests, and the priests were divided up into 24 different divisions or courses, so that each division would serve about 2 weeks per year. And so they would cast lots to determine who would serve and when. So David did a lot of organizing. He also organized 24 courses or divisions of musicians and divisions of porters or gatekeepers for around the temple. And he appointed Levites to manage the treasury of the Lord, and appointed Levites as officers and judges of the kingdom. So he set up judges and officers, and he did a lot of organization before he died. In chapter 27, David also set it up so that each month an army of 24,000 men were on active duty for a month at a time and at all times. And beginning with verse 25 to the end of the chapter describes David's governmental leaders and the areas to which they were assigned. So in chapter 28, David gives a farewell address, and he explains how the Lord chose him to be king and his desire to build the temple, but that the Lord wanted Solomon to be the next king to build the temple. And so David charges Solomon to be faithful to God and to build the temple. So in the final chapter, David charges the people to help Solomon to build the temple. And David personally gave 110 tons of gold, 260 tons of silver, and he appealed to the people to give to help complete the Lord's work. And so they responded generously and with joy. And so there were 190 tons of gold and 185 pounds given, 375 tons of silver, 675 tons of brass, 3,750 tons of iron. And then we find that David finally prayed and gives a prayer of dedication. And then Solomon becomes king. So that's where First Chronicles ends, with David appointing Solomon to become the king, charging them to be faithful in carrying out the Lord's work, organizing things. And so he set the stage for Solomon to have a very good and prosperous reign. The enemies had been subdued. A lot of things had been organized to cause things to run better. And the Lord would be worshipped in Jerusalem, and the temple would be built. So don't forget to join us in the after show, where we look into more details about the book of First Chronicles. Thank you for being with us.
What wondrous love is this, oh my soul, my soul? What wondrous love is this, oh my soul? What wondrous love is this? Here goes the Lord of bliss, to bear the dreadful curse for my soul, to bear the dreadful curse.